Good morning. This is Grow Your Power, and I am your host, Ann Greenfield. Grow Your Power has been a presentation of homesteading skills and experiences and alternative lifestyles. Today we're going to discuss a socio-economic political subject, capitalism to cooperation. There was a moment for me this last spring, probably triggered by the announcement of COVID-19, when I saw the whole earth going down. All the life, the green, and the remaining people trying to live in a barren place. I had a deep belly sob for all. I love it all. I thought of my granddaughter and the kind of world she was inheriting. And I set myself to do whatever I could to make the world better for her. So here's a show on something that I think can make the world better. I believe the economic system of unrestrained capitalism is primarily responsible for the devastation of the earth. Profiteering, sanctioned by our system, gives top value to wealth, to acquisition, to individual gain, often at the expense of other people and organisms. We are all part of this, we North Americans. We have been raised on individualism and vast consumerism. We like our products, many of which come from large, self-aggrandizing corporations. In the practice of capitalism, hundreds of animal species have lost habitat. The earth has become covered with roads and pipelines, large homes, and poisoned ag lands. Scientists say that dozens of species are going extinct every day. And biodiversity is reported essential to human survival. Our peoples are not happy. Because of the inequities of wealth, many people struggle just to survive. 35 million of our citizens face hunger daily. 7.9%, or by another estimate, 26%, is the unemployment rate currently. 1% of our population controls 40% of our country's wealth. This seriously disturbs my belief in equitable, and fairness. I am suggesting that, first, we all look at our culture's self-concept. We are egocentric here in the Western world. We think in terms of an independent I whose primary job is to focus on and take care of itself. The rest of the world, research shows us, is socio-centric. People in these societies think of themselves as we, and how to best fit in and contribute to the whole. I think we Americans would benefit from even a few more drops of the socio-centric model. My friend Johanna Bresnan, whom we'll hear from later, said, when we were talking about how to save the world, "What's good for one of us has to be good for everyone." Well, that sounded impossible, but I think what it means is that we open our arms wide to take everyone into our consciousness, then do what would feel right for everyone, to do our best in that regard. I like that. Fits my gut belief in equality and fairness. Language is important, I think, and words like everyone and we should enter our conversations more. My radio shows have been geared towards empowering us, us regular people. I have faith in us, the Grassroots USA. I imagine a socio-economic revolution to change the world. Politics will come later. After all, if we are the 99%, the majority, we have a lot of potential power. I'd like to refer you to a previous radio show of mine, Business in a New Way, and that is at soundcloud.com, where I discuss in more detail the effects of consumerism and the different concepts of self around the world. Capitalism is based on competition, going way back to Darwin, who popularized the statement, survival of the fittest, getting to the top, one person pitted against another. Under this philosophy, there is little empathy for persons that are disadvantaged by genetics, by inheritances, by upbringing, by gender, skin color biases. They're just the losers in a win-lose system. I say, let's try moving toward cooperation instead, using what everyone has to offer, creating more mutual support. Cooperation is said to create a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, a basic human need whether we realize that or not. Competition, on the other hand, can lead to a feeling of isolation and division, resentment, deference.
You do, so you are possessed.
Losers rarely feel great. Actually, winning for me is a mixed blessing. Pride of accomplishment, yes, but I feel pain, guilt maybe, for the loser. I have become excited to learn about worker cooperatives. Worker cooperatives allow the body of workers to legislate their own wages, standards, working conditions, etc. for themselves, sometimes through representation. The workers in a cooperative have a say in the direction of the company, a voice in their own fate. Cooperatives developed in the early 1800s in reaction to the growing industrial capitalism. An example of one I found interesting was a residential co-op that went on to form other residential co-ops. It was started by just a group of 28 men who envisioned an equitable society and saved their money for startup. A recent cooperative movement started in the 1960s. The co-op's main precepts were collective ownership and egalitarian voting rights. Eliminated was the divisive hierarchy of a boss owner, making the rules for the employees and setting the wages. Currently, company owners and bosses earn as much as 312 times the salary of the lowest employee. One of the first co-ops of the 60s was the Freedom Quilting Bee. It began with a group of African American women who liked to quilt together. They were encouraged to become an official worker-owned cooperative, and thus became part of a history of cooperatives that raised the status and wealth of poor black communities. Currently in Switzerland are 9,600 cooperatives, including a bank and an insurance company. Emmanuel Camden of the International Labor Organization states, "Co-ops are a model which bring market logic together with social inclusion, making solidarity the focus of concern." Interestingly, co-ops have been shown to have greater resilience, productivity, company and employment stability, and worker satisfaction. One study shows that cooperatives are the only enterprises that foster trust between employees. I have a personal experience that changed the trust level between myself and my employees. I was the owner, administrator, and teacher for a preschool and after-school daycare. I started with just 6 children to myself, and then enlarged to an enrollment of 14. At that point, I hired a revolving role of assistants with 2 young women as regulars. I began to sense the classic employee complaints towards me, the boss, were beginning to happen. So I asked these 2 women if they would join me in managing the school. I was already paying myself their same wage. We discussed all the children and the issues once a week and agreed on procedures. I could feel the trust grow between us as they became empowered, and I benefited from their freed-up perceptions. Richard D. Wolff, economics professor and co-founder of Democracy at Work, states that the core relationship in any enterprise is what is important. And he believes in looking at not just the relationship between workers, or between workers and managers or owners, but also between the company and surrounding community, and the company and the consumers. He envisions a grand system of worker cooperatives, wherein each is supportive and helpful to another, as perhaps a stronger co-op would share profits with a weaker cooperative. I consider R.D. Wolff to be a harbinger of things to come. If you don't know of him, check him out on YouTube. There's a long archive of his 30-minute shows in easy-to-understand economics. I interviewed a board member of a local workers' cooperative, John Harrison of Alvarado Bakery of Petaluma, California. Alvarado bakes and sells whole-grain, organic, sprouted breads, bagels, buns. Today it's a national company. There are 83 worker owners, a management corps, and a board of directors, all under a checks and balance system. The co-op started as a hippie consensus group, says John, but soon had management problems and felt the need to hire some professionals, for example, coordinators, a CPA. Alvarado board members are elected by the worker owners and serve on a rotating basis, each serving 3 years. The managers and coordinators are hired by the board and approved by the voters, and the pay ratio is 4.5 to 1. The company profits are shared equally by everyone, and the books are transparent. A certain percentage of profits are saved out for 3 years for hidden costs, and then the leftovers are shared out again. The company positions can change. John has moved through several over the last 12 years, from bread truck driver to sales. It feels like we're equals here, he says, with mutual respect. And a quarterly total group meeting helps make us feel like a family. I'd like to see lots of cooperatives formed. Coming out of COVID and a disturbed economy is a good time to form something new. In one of R.D. Wolff's shows, he talks about how capitalism transitioned out of feudalism. In feudalism, lords held power over various lands and rented sections out to peasants. These peasant serfs grew food for themselves and a quantity for the lord as rent, and the serfs owed loyalty to their lord. The feudal system began breaking down with the bubonic plague in the 14th century. 1/3 of the European population died. The serf-to-lord ratio suffered. The system didn't work any longer. The serfs moved to towns, and men with some capital began hiring others for wages. Capitalism was born. This situation of feudalism transitioning to another kind of economy is beginning to sound possible for our current situation. Our society and economy have been seriously upset. COVID-19 has closed many small businesses. Many workers are out of work, and prices have gone up with distribution and production problems, and people have less money. Capitalism is breaking down. Neither capitalism nor our government has been able to take care of the people. Also, John Samuelson, International President of Transport Workers Union, states that there's a, quote, developing consciousness amongst workers of the inequities in their employment. The COVID pandemic has shown up the lack of care from bosses due to the profit motive. The trade union, the collective approach, is being seen as necessary. Samuelson prophesies that a massive organizing boom will be following the pandemic, and, quote, we will see a new age of workers standing up to bosses. The time is ripe for change into more equitable relationships between owner-managers and workers. It's time to create a positive alternative to capitalism. Cooperation, not capitalism. That to me looks like a better world for a lot of people. After a music break, I will join a roundtable discussion of visions for worker cooperatives and what might be the next steps in setting one up. I am joining today 3 friends of mine. I could introduce them according to their incredible talents and the roles they have played in our country. But I want to stress that we're just regular people. We are the grassroots that create social revolutions. One similarity all 4 of us have is that we are elders. And as elders, we perhaps have more experiences to draw wisdom from and more time to visualize a new future. So let me introduce Bob. Can you say hello?
Hello there, everybody.
And Joanna Bresnan.
Hi, everybody.
And her partner, Tingo Mike.
Good morning.
So our first question today is, what appeals to you about worker co-ops?
Well, we're at a precipitous time in the world, I think, and the notion of people at the ground level, ordinary people, having a say and power over their own fate and conditions is really appealing right now. We've built for a long time on the authoritarian paradigm, and we're used to being controlled from above, but worker co-ops provide a way for everybody to participate, for everybody to have a voice in what's coming and what's going down, and what are we doing together here. I love that.
Yeah, I see that it's a working democracy.
Yeah, democratizing the workplace, because clearly we've lost it in politics.
At first it looks like we're turning everything upside down, where the worker really is the key. Labor is what's going to add to the investment, to the capital to produce. And when everybody feels they're a part and they share it, they're unified in terms of their vision for something together, that they could create something better, not only a better product, but a better life for themselves.
Right.
That's what excites me about it. And we turn it from Wall Street back to the everyday lunchbox guy, or the person that has to go to work every day and earn his keep.
It's a good time to gather on projects and goals, but more than anything, it's a matter of designing our future. And I feel like that starts with taking inventory and finding out what ingredients you have ready, handy, to make the future that you want to see.
Right on. I think it's a really ripe time also for making changes, since our current social economic situation is falling apart. And we've got to change it. We've got to do something.
I agree.
Yeah.
Time has come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like everything that we've gone to bat for decades and decades is no longer working.
The capitalist system.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Unmuzzled.
The whole foundation, the whole dualistic thinking of capital versus labor, me versus you, the wealthy versus the poor, all these kind of divisions.
I think they're married in origin to the feudal system, where you had, after enclosure took over and property became private, you had the lord of the manor, and then everybody working for him, and that's what were replicated in the workplace. But it's not the only model available.
What else do you see about the current system that is not working?
I think it requires that the workers remain unaware of their possibilities.
Good point.
I think education is a key there. And as we have become aware of things happening around the world, we have a better understanding of why we're in such turmoil. So with the information highway, I believe that we have every right to drive on it as everyone else.
Kind of like the indigenous person who never saw a ship before, looked out and saw these clouds on the horizon, which were really ships, but he had no way to put
Wooden clouds.
Yeah, there was no context within which he could define what that was. He wasn't able to see it as ships. And there's something about we workers who somehow have been given these, I call them presuppositions. They're ideas that were given to us before we learned how to think for ourselves, that we always had to be under, that we always had to work hard, that we always had to do all these things, and then we would get the reward. But the reality is, it's like a dog race, and the laborer never gets the rabbit. The dog never gets the rabbit. There's no reward. And so he just keeps working and, living by the promise of another way has pretty much died, or they never saw it. So for them, they don't believe, the worker, that we could really turn this thing around so that what happens on the local level in terms of we the people and how we see our survival together can become more of the focus rather than it's always being outside somewhere else that we're depending on Wall Street or the government to do something for us that isn't happening.
Exactly. Empowering the worker, empowering ourselves to think that we can run things ourselves.
Well, yeah, and at some point we have to address what our needs really are. To touch back on the thing that you mentioned, if you commit, the way I was raised, if you commit fully to the system and work hard, you will be rewarded and your needs will be met. And the only notion of needs we ever get are from television and advertising and movies and essentially media messages that have become the core of family life. And none of this really touches our inner life. None of it does. And we need to examine those in terms of our needs.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the need for connection and for belonging. Abraham Maslow says that's the third requirement after our security needs are met, that we need as humans to belong. And I think that that's a need that a lot of people don't realize.
I'm starting to think that we've been seriously led away from some of our greater strengths as a species. And you say enslavement, and yeah, that's kind of what it amounts to, because we can be enslaved by our very thoughts. By our very thoughts and apprehensions. Mm-hmm. And the market wants to meet your every need, but they supply the worldview of what your needs are, what you're allowed to claim as a need. The whole thing's a sham.
And I also think that the media tends to distract us from these truths with things to keep us busy, thinking about other things, rather than analyzing the truth of our situation and getting empowered to do the things that are in our hearts to do.
Well, let's turn to some specifics. Like, Bob, could you tell us your vision of a different way, a way of cooperation as opposed to capitalism, a workers' cooperative, perhaps?
Well, one of my favorite workers' co-op dreams, you might say, fantasies, is a sizable group of people on a large property that plant crops intended to sequester carbon at a high rate. That could be hemp, could be bamboo, could be any number of things that I don't have the expertise to know yet. And those crops turned into whatever is workable on a simple physical level to replace single-use plastic in as much of the market as possible. So we're sequestering carbon and we're replacing petroleum-based bric-a-brac as quickly as possible. And everybody who works there has a voice in the place, and we live there. And we take care of the workers, and the money coming in supplies us with a decent life, and we're all doing the same thing. And I think a different kind of community could erupt out of that. I really do.
Having a goal or a value together, I think, is important. As you say, the people that live there have to believe in their product. Like, we're doing a good thing. We want to be involved in this.
Right.
That was my problem. I retired and I wasn't really ready to stop. But the thing is, what's worth doing now? What is really worth doing that's not simply selfish and self-rewarding?
Cool.
Right.
Good question.
This is one.
It's like what makes a marriage a good marriage. You know, it has to do with putting your heart into it, having a vision for becoming something other than two individuals that's greater than each one apart, that actually can synergize into something greater. And I believe that we have that power, and it's in the conversation, it's in agreement. It's how we in conversation can come to agreements that really do work for each other in a way that stimulate us and encourage us to be for one another, because we can see that when we add to one another, we all win. Why do we do and keep doing what we're doing? Do we really think about it, or we just get led by our needs and the currents of life keep sweeping us along? See, I believe we can change.
I think most of us are shaped by early childhood trauma.
Right on.
Provided by the culture through generations of Ozzie and Harriet style culture modification.
Right on.
You know. And it sets us up to fail at relationships and be dedicated to work.
Father knows best.
There you go.
So we remember the whole patriarchal thing that's on us. Basically, everything, our law, our everything is based on the idea of patriarchy.
That the state
Man
has
over
to consist of authority.
Yeah.
That's its
Right.
place in the whole thing, and that's
Right.
what's been turned against us. Whatever happened to God? Is the state there to break us into little pieces that can not unite with God in our heart? Is that what it's is that what it's doing?
Well, what's actually happened is we've deprived ourselves, or humanity has deprived ourselves of at least 50% of the solution fabricators or believers. And, separating the men from the women, that's 50% right off there.
That was
and then
intentional.
to fragmentize those of the men is another deprivation. So, we need to recognize we all matter, we all count, we all need to come together
especially the
and make
women.
a difference that's going to affect all of our great grandkids.
Yeah, neat. Thank you for bringing that in. And Mike, I appreciate your bringing in the personal relationship of marriage or coupling, because I've seen that too has to have an overriding value or goal that allows two people to connect in order to work on it.
See,
We've worked hard at creating an environment where we both can thrive. And I think that, like you said, Father knows best, having been a difficult thing. We've worked a lot of that stuff out in our own personal relationships.
Arranging things to accommodate two different lives.
Interesting.
This was the thing I think that really helped us work through some of our difficulties. Principles versus preferences. We can modify our preferences to accommodate someone we care about, but we can't violate our principles and maintain our integrity. So we have to define what are our principles, the founding principles in life, in a relationship. What is it that you cannot compromise on, and come to an agreement on what that is? And I think society as a whole has forgotten things like integrity and ethics. I mean, at the very best, I see situational ethics are rampant in the governance of our country. And I think it's time to reevaluate what is ethical and what is a principle.
What do we really value? What does our heart commit to?
What is the character of the God you're serving? Angry, vengeful, Old Testament. Supportive, loving.
There you go.
Unconditional, New Testament.
Mike, can you tell us some visions I've heard you talk about, a food forest, working that into a workers' cooperative?
Well, we had 25 years of experience in Costa Rica with the intention of creating a farm-to-table community and putting our focus, instead of on crops, on the trees. And in my experience in 50 years of living on and off in Costa Rica, without trees, the land dries up. You deforest, you get desertification. And the water tables fall and the land dries. I've seen it, it's happening. And, rivers turn into little trickles. It's happened here. Anyway, the misuse of water and how all that fits with everything is extremely, important.
Yes.
So the idea of putting our focus back on the trees and off the crops is one that really challenges us, because when you do that, you allow what needs to grow under the trees to grow. And when you allow it in a place like that's fertile, with good soil that hasn't been raped of its necessary components.
Biology.
Its biology is, where war hasn't been done on the earth. It's amazing how things happen. And we've watched land in 7 years. People would take a pasture, and people that have done this before plant food forests. And within 7 or 8 years, you can go in that area, and I'm telling you, there is everything there you need to live. 7 years. So we're seeing this happen in places like Costa Rica, where there are eco villages being formed with these permaculture ideas.
The food forest thing also figured was a large component of how my co-op idea germinated. I was interested in a group in Austin, Texas called Mobile Loaves and Fishes. And they started out feeding the homeless in the street, but at this point they've got 50 acres. They're housing the homeless securely with heat and a locking door, And the homeless have skills. Surprise. So they are powering a small town, and they have a library, and they have a food forest, and they feed themselves, and they have an auto repair place, and they're selling all kinds of things from the property. Now if you put that together with productive use of the land and sequestering carbon, that's at the heart of how the employees are becoming a village, that they can feed themselves there, and with real food that bring the body back in tune.
Beautiful.
Let it do what it's supposed to.
That's a great example, and I remember seeing a video, and I was so impressed, because this is the answer, I believe, to homelessness, is this idea of creating a village where people can not just come to be housed, but where they can farm, where they can have vocational opportunities to learn, where they can be spa'd, cared for. I mean, it makes total sense.
Joanna, I wonder what you would see as the next step in manifesting a workers' cooperative.
Well, I think the need is now. I mean, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not sure I know where to begin, but it's so obvious that we have to come together and find ways to collaborate and cooperate. And I think that scientifically it's been proven that species that have learned to collaborate and cooperate thrive. And I think that we need to test that out in humanity and find ways where we can come together and deal with these problems. I think just the conversation, again, it's in the beginning was a conversation, and the conversation was God. And I think that as we realize that we can be part of that solution, we can deal with all these issues. You know, there's ways where we can serve each other and benefit each other mutually. And some of us have more of a means than others.
I think as a first thing is to find a group of people that we're akin to, or whoever's going to start this, and then need a piece of land and a mission statement. That's how I see a progress.
In my experience so far, the problem for me right now, I mean, I've got an instruction manual from the UC Regents of 40 pages, and it tells you exactly how to start a workers' co-op, and it may as well be in Latin. It's, to me, in a way, it's impenetrable. And I know people that can work in a co-op. I don't know any business heads. I have the wherewithal to see the vision of the thing, but I don't know business people.
Yeah.
I don't know where to find them. We need a social mixer with distancing involved to bring in legal savvy.
See,
I think if it incorporates a workers' co-op, we'll have all the advantages that corporations get in the modern world, all the strengths, and release from liability.
may this conversation and others lead to us being able to break or release what that thing is that makes us want to hoard. Because there's a lot of money out there that is being hoarded and a lot of property out there that's being hoarded that we could use in a way that would profit those people rather than just sitting there. I don't need to own anything to make it better. We can make a lot of things better. We could improve properties. If we had a better understanding of commons, we could bless each other by caring for our commons in a way that worked for one another. Things like that. Those are conversations that I think...
What became of the commons is a conversation that needs to come out.
So, can you imagine renting a big piece of property? Is that... what you're saying?
I think as a group we could make agreements with the quote-unquote owners to begin to see that land as hopefully sacred, that it really doesn't belong to him or anybody else. It belongs to all of us in a way. But I don't need to exercise my ownership. I need to exercise my stewardship.
Yeah.
I need to care enough to go out and pull weeds and do what has to be done to bring order to the situation, to the land, whatever, to the garden. And I think it's that idea that we all can do something for the whole, for us. In other words, we are so much important at this point in history than any of us eyes.
More important, yeah.
As individuals. We must become something together, and we can.
There's a word for it. We're a species.
Right.
We could start acting like one instead of a disembodied brain trip. That's what we're all living.
Unplug from the dependency to the matrix.
Well, if there's only one God, you tell me who your enemy is.
Oh,
I
man.
don't get it.
Right.
You tell me why everything's binary.
This reminds me of something you said to me the last time we were talking, Johanna. You said, what's good for one of us has to be good. It has to be good for most of us. And I said, I don't like the word most. I like the word everyone. And I wonder if you could expand that idea that you were putting across.
Well, I do think it has to ultimately work for all of us. Creating a world that works for all is the challenge. And I think the process sometimes means some people will get lost. There is the reality of collateral damage.
Especially in process.
But to delay it means more fatalities, more loss.
For my last question is, I wanted to ask personally how do you see your own role in a possible workers' cooperative?
Well, I guess I'm sort of like a head hunter, talent scout, because I know that at 78 there's a lot of things I'm not going to be able to complete. So I'm looking for the ingredients that are going to be able to help us complete the picture that I'm given for the project. And I guess it's funny. As you were asking me that question, I remembered myself as a little girl. I could entertain myself for hours in the dirt with a garden hose, and I would create hills and valleys and waterways and imagine houses and so forth. And I've always felt a touch of leaning towards doing something with the land. And as I came into my adulthood and ended up with my partner, we found out that our dreams actually merged. And we started talking about creating a village that worked for all. And I feel like this is a planet that has the ingredients to put together a globe, a planet that works for everybody. And I guess that's my vision. I just see it happening. And so my thing in life with the community, whatever position I have while I'm able to do anything, is I want to encourage, incite, provoke everybody to participate in their highest form to help fulfill this vision.
And I've always found you to be very positive and empowering to people. And I think that's a good trait to have in a cooperative.
Changing from I to we is an evolution. It's an evolutionary thing that I as a male am going through. and especially how I see myself with my other parts, my female parts, my other parts, and it's good. I'm learning how to join with the other in a way that isn't competitive, and it's not about me and my ego anymore. It's about us. And so
How about you, Bob? What do you see your role in an actual workers' cooperative?
Designer cheerleader? I don't know. I like to put ideas together, and that's what I'm trying to do with it. Like I said earlier, I'd like to find somebody who has a sense of how the business end of it should run. I know they're out there. But it made sense to me to make a new political party called the Special Party, based on the word species, special, special, the Special Party. And we serve the species on the planet.
Oh, I love
species.
it. I love it. Well, I have done a lot of organizing in my life. I'm frustrated with that organizational angle, and I would just like to work with the land.
see, peace in the conversation would allow us to get to these kind of, greater agreements and more ability, more capacity, I believe, to include each other.
We
Important
need to
thing.
recognize that it needs all of us.
I want to thank you all for being here. I feel really good about all of us and our integrity and our desires for goodness. So, thank you.
I appreciate the chance to get my thoughts heard. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it was good. I feel like I've gotten to know more allies. And I think that's what we're doing, is we're creating a coalition of like minds to do good things.
I want to put friend right here in the middle of everything. I mean, we become friends, and it's by virtue of the fact that we've been able to really speak to each other about things, get pissed off at each other, whatever. And but we've learned from each other and come to this place, which is now, and it's a wonderful place to be here with you.
And the sense of shared values, and at our age, the sense of a shared fate. And for those younger, it's the witnessing of what's going to happen to the kids.